Great. A very warm welcome to one and all. Uh, Today, we are here on a very, very important and a pertinent topic today, which we are going to be, which is going to be talked upon by two very good experts in the field. We have a talk on basics of paper writing, which will relate to uh, all the doubts, which will clear all the doubts in basics of writing a paper, of paper publication, which I think is really important in the current era. And we have another talk by Dr. Yusuf, who's going to be talking about systematic reviews and meta analysis. Our first speaker today is Dr. Kalpana Singh. Madam is the founder, Joint Secretary of the Indian Fertility Society, Bihar chapter, treasurer of the IFS Bihar chapter, member of the curriculum committee surgical specialty at the NMC. She's a professor of reproductive medicine at IGIMS Patna and has more than 35 publications in national and international journals, recipient of the Bharat Ratna Radhakrishnan Gold Medal Award, Best Paper Gold Medal Award in Embryology embryology section in the National Conference of Fertivision in 2018, and a best paper as well as in GFM Con 2018. Over to you, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Rupali, for your very kind words. First of all, I would like to express my thanks for the opportunity. I love being interaction with you and with Haryana chapter. So thank you very much. So shall I start my presentation?
Yes, please do. You need to share the screen.
Okay.
Yeah. You need to share your talk.
Yes. Is it visible?
Yes, it is visible. But you need to put it on a power, like a screen.
Yeah. So slideshow, it's okay?
Yes,
Shall
yes.
I start?
Go ahead. Please go ahead.
So I'll be talking about the basics of paper writing, how to write a scientific paper. Just a minute. Actually, I need to minimize this. All the audio audience is coming, so it's hiding my screen.
Mr. Shivam, can we do something about it?
Yeah, now I think
we can see your full screen, ma'am. No worries.
Yeah, at our end, we can see your full screen. It is fine. There's nothing, no obstruction right now. But she will have problem with reading, I think.
You have to minimize the zoom, ma'am.
Now it's okay.
Yeah.
So actually writing a paper is more difficult than operating. It's not mechanical. We have to, brain has to function twice more when we write than when we talk. So actually writing is more difficult. Coming to the types of scientific papers, we have got original papers, in which information is based on original research. Then we have got case reports, then letters to editor, review articles are there in which detailed analysis of recent research on a specific topic is done. Then we have got commentary in which short article with author's personal opinion is there, and we have got editorials. So basically I'll be limiting my talk to original case reports, original article. So first of all is I'll be talking about abstract. So abstract is always written in the last. When you have got all the paper done, then only we write the abstract. So abstract varies in length from one paragraph to several pages, depends on the requirement of the journal, and there is a specific format for it, which is called EMRAD format, in which I stands for introduction, in which 25% of the space is important, is given for introduction. Then methods, 25% of the space in what you did, 35% of the space what you found, that is result, and 15% is given for the discussion. So these are the 4 segments in which we write a scientific paper: introduction, methods, result, and discussion. So I'll be starting with introduction. So in introduction, basically, we have to say, we have to focus what is the data needs. Why are we writing this article? Why this scientific paper? So data need has to be identified. We have to spell out the research question, and then the objectives has to be clearly defined. These are 3 parts of introduction. So we begin with providing the reader with a background information on the topic of the paper, describe what is known about a disease, technique, topic, or compound, and why it is an important topic. Then we narrow the knowledge gap. Then we define the unmet needs. So narrow the introduction. Unknown information, unsolved problems, or the knowledge gap, these are focused then. And after this, we highlight the limitations of the prior studies. There may be like sometimes we can say that there is lack of good analytical techniques, or there is no randomized control trial, or the study participants were very small in previous studies. After that, it becomes important to put a hypothesis or a research question, or what is the purpose of the research. So we have to define goal of the study. The text must provide a clear rationale why you initiated the study. The reason for doing a search are limited. You test a hypothesis, answer a question, or solve a problem. So the paper has to fulfill this criteria, and the text should include something like the following. We hypothesize whatever research topic is there, or we want to test the hypothesis. We ask whether this is true or not, or to answer this question. So in this way, we study we introduce the topic. Then in the introduction section is always written in the present tense. That is very important for the PG students. So this section is always written in present tense. What we have to do, these are important parts. The context has to be defined, zoom in from a general to specific, critically review what is known and what is unknown. So we have to highlight the knowledge gap, make it natural that the study has to be done, end with the aim and objectives. That should be very much clearly defined as the part of introduction, and document facts with references. These are sometimes problem historical details. Frequently, very long introduction is there, or sometimes introduction is very general or vague, and at times it may contain discussion material, and sometimes it is imitative of some other study. Now coming to the methods. Methods is what did you do? So in methods section, basically, we have to plan the analysis and prepare the data collection instruments. So whenever we write methods, these questions should be answered. Who were the study participants? What was done? When it was done? Where and how? All these things should be clearly answered when we are describing the methods. So for methods, this is an algorithm that whenever we study the individuals or group is selected, then we have to see who are eligible participants and who are not eligible. Not eligible has to be excluded. These are part of methods. And then of all the who are eligible, everybody is not going to be the participants. So we have to see all those who gave consent, they become the participants. Those who were did not give consent, they were not included in the study. And then if it was a randomized trial, then treatment or control group has to be defined. So methods section is always written in the past tense, but when we submit the synopsis, then it is in the future tense. Now coming to the methods checklist. So does it describe what questions were being asked, what is being tested, how reliable was the measurement, were the parameters recorded and analyzed correctly, would a reader be able to repeat the same experiment? If this question is answered, then methods is correctly written. So if there has been one is I have already told that we have to turn the future tense into past tense. Then structure of the section, describe what was done, quote only the key references that describe the methods used, and do not use passive voice, do not provide results. Here we are only writing the methods, how the study was conducted. Do not provide excessive detail on information collected. There are various guidelines and recommendations are available online. So standard reporting guidelines should be used. If whenever available, they are very useful. Like CONSORT is available for randomized control trial, STARD, that is for diagnostic accuracy studies. Then STROBE is available for observational study epidemiology. CURMA or PRISMA is available for systematic review. MOOS is for meta-analysis of observational studies. So we have to do the checklist. We have to complete all the information what is needed in the material and methods. So this is just an example for the flow chart of randomized study. Flow, participants, protocol deviation. If there is any protocol deviation, then again it has to be mentioned. Date of recruitment and follow-up, baseline demographics, number of participants, summary of results, report other analysis, and adverse events. So these all should be described in material and methods. Now coming to the result, what did you find? What was the observation? So here we have to focus is on two parts. Data has to be collected. After collection of the data, it has to be analyzed. So how to write results? The most straightforward approach is to use a chronological order with subheadings that parallel the methods and their sequence presented earlier in the paper. So this order allows readers to uh, to more easily go back and refer the methods and associate with the given results. So this is important. So in chronological order is one of the way of writing the results. Then we can group by topic or experiment, sometimes from general to specific, and sometimes from most to least important. These are the ways of writing results. So this already I have already told key results. How to choose your sequential logic to make it easy for the reader or viewer, from simple to complex, from general to specific, or from beginning to end. These are the ways of writing results. Sometimes we can group them by according to the different, if different essays has been used, then essay 1 diagnostic accuracy, performance, interference, cost. Then in this way the results are written. Sometimes it can be grouped by measured parameters, diagnostic accuracy of essay 1, essay 2, essay 3, then performance of essay 1, essay 2, essay 3. So there are various ways the writer can choose it. But we have to know that data and results are not the same. So they are just facts and numbers. So we collect basically data after when we do the study. So data and numbers are available. So data are usually presented in tables and figures as raw data or summarized data in the form of mean, percentage, median, or range. The results are a statement in the main text that summarize or explain what the data is showing. So results, data and result are not same. That we have to differentiate. This is a common way of writing a result in a table way. So first we have to give the title, then common headings are there, then there are rows, there are footnotes, and in the percentage we express our results. Sometimes graphs are very important. We can show it in tables. And sometimes we select graph as a method of showing our result. So they suggest the data are arranged in the table form or in the graph form. So summarize rows and columns, compare the numbers in columns, arrange key data by magnitude, align numbers by decimal, no logical order, horizontal bar, and logical order sometimes is there from vertical bars are comparing the proportion. So same thing has been expressed in two ways. We can see this is one of the graph and it shows the number of cases in a given year. But here there is unnecessary graphic elements are there, 3D effect is there, unnecessary lines are there. Same thing has been expressed in this graph also, but this looks far more easier. So we have to select what is a better way of expressing any data in which is more more easily understandable by the audience. So while we are writing the results, the do's are recycle the methods outlined if possible, walk the reader through salient findings, provide numerators with denominators. This we always should write whenever we are writing the percentage, so that it is clear ki what were the denominators and what is the finding. Caption the information in tables and figures, describe the information in simple terms, and backup statement with data in sentences or tables. Additional tips, number of items like few variables should be used. Use text many variables. If there are many variables, then it has to be expressed in table. Present unexpected findings. Do not give results to a greater degree of accuracy than the measure, and avoid appearance or disappearance of groups abbreviations unless it is very much acceptable by the reader. In results, the don'ts is do not use a general sentence, do not re-explain methods, do not discuss or interpret results, do not quote references, do not spell out every result on the table, do not use adjectives or qualifiers, and do not use etc. These are not, this should never be done while we are writing the results. Now coming to the last part of it, which is discussion. So when we are writing the discussion, then actually in discussion we have to write everything that is interpretation. So initially we have to write this summary of the findings without quantified results. What was found, then making points first and second, what we can conclude from the finding. Then we have to write down the limitations of the study, and then last paragraph is of conclusion and recommendations, that which means what we can make out of it. So we can start the discussion by these questions. What exactly the study shows? What might that mean? What else could the result be how else could the result be interpreted? Have other studies had similar results? Or if there is disagreement with the previous researchers, what are the study's strength and weakness, and what exactly should happen next? So after beginning, in the middle, we explain the limitation of our study. We recognize the limitation of our study. Whatever is the limitation, that has to be written. Then we have to confess it that there is no study is without limitations or bias. So confess whatever is the limitation. So this is an example has been given. So, and in the end, we have to give the definite conclusion. What was exactly the finding of your study, and what is derived from the conclusion? Many a times conclusion is written what was not the part of the study. So that should not happen. Restate the answer to the question, that is what was the research question, and so what answer we have got after the study. Signal the end by using a phrase such as in conclusion or in summary, so the reader will know the answer. And the indicate of importance of work like stating applications, recommendations, implications, or speculations can be written. So additional tips, do not simply repeat results in discussion. Keep the discussion as short as possible so the reader grasps take-home messages. Use words rather than numbers or stats. Avoid promising future papers or studies. Avoid more research is needed unless you say very specific what is needed. For example, a large multicentric study should be conducted to confirm these results and to address many issues, including the best dose of matrocedin and the length and frequency of therapy necessary to produce and maintain clinical remission. So these type of sentences should be avoided in discussion. So this was all about the discussion. So at the end, I would just like to say that being understood and getting it across crisply is the actual skill of writing a scientific paper. So language and writing style will deliver the message. And there are 6S of scientific writing. That is, it has to be simple, short, structured, sequential, strong, and specific. And as we are not very much strong in our English, so many a times there are common grammatical errors. It happens. So the common errors in English that Indian author makes in negotiating the peer review jungle. So whenever we are writing the review of literature, of then some grammatical mistakes do happen. So we have to look that also. So thank you all for your very patient listening.
Thank you, madam, for that very comprehensive and very nicely put points. And the entire talk, I think, was quite a comprehensive talk, put very, very nicely and in a very, very short form and in a very good manner. I would now move over to the next talk.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, please stay back towards the end for questions, if in case there are any questions. But before that, we'll move to the next talk. We have just a second.
Good evening, ma'am. Surbin ma'am, good evening.
So our next speaker.
Good evening, Kalpana. How are you?
Fine, ma'am. Thank you.
Hi, Yusuf.
Hi. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Yusuf. He's a consultant in the reproductive medicine at King's Fertility and King's College Hospital, London. He's currently completing his PhD at the King's College and has a huge experience in writing systematic reviews as well as network meta-analysis. We are very happy to have you. He's a faculty member at the undergraduate studies at the King's College London, as well as a faculty member of the Global School of Education at Harvard Medical School. Without much of a delay, we want you to go ahead with the talk. It is a very, very important and interesting topic, which I think we all need to work on. I would just stop share here and you can share your presentation, Dr. Yusuf.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right, that's me. Thank you for the nice introduction. And so I've been asked today to come and talk to you guys a little bit about how to conduct a systematic review. So if there's any questions, please feel free to ask in the question box and I'll answer them as we go ahead. And I don't have any conflicts of interest. Some of the results that I'm discussing here are papers of my own, so it shouldn't be a problem. And I'm not quoting anything that's I got any research fees for. So the idea is, how do you guys start whatever idea you have, and how do you end up with something like this? So what we have here is a combination of results that's usually published within a systematic review manuscript. You've got your standard forest plot, which we'll go through in a moment. And more importantly, you've got your bias assessment as well here. And that's as important as the results, because it allows us to interpret the results the correct way. So why is it important? Well, systematic review is actually one of the top form of evidence that's out there in the research world. It allows us to review every single paper that's been published in a structured way as well as a comprehensive way. And as long as we've got the right question design, it also allows us to assess bias within various form of studies out there. And more importantly, allows us to drive decision-making from an evidence point of view. So the way systematic review is done, it allows two interventions to be compared to another. The technical term for that is a pairwise analysis. And like my colleague has said, there's other form of analysis like a network, which allows more than two forms of interventions to be compared. But for the sake of this talk, we're focusing just two interventions being compared to another, and that's known as a pairwise analysis. So the importance of it, like I've touched base, it allows intervention. It allows us to assess interventions in terms of efficacy. And it allows us to identify research gaps. Sometimes you have an idea, and if you do the correct search strategy, you realize that's actually not been done before. So it allows us to appreciate where the evidence lacked and how an RCT, for example, can be defined. Most RCTs require a systematic review to be done in the background in order to support it, to get funding for sure. And from a research point of view, it allows us to get an up-to-date knowledge, but also helps from policy development and also from a guideline development as well. And when you see a patient in your clinic, it allows us to provide evidence-based medicine, which is what we all should strive to practice. And this is what I was focusing on, I was telling you later. From an evidence ladder point of view, systematic review is actually the top of that ladder. So from an importance, from a manuscript point of view, it's quite important to do because it actually collaborates all the various RCTs that's been published out there, and it allows us to give the most profound kind of results. So how do we go ahead to do a systematic review? I think the first thing you guys need to do is actually define your research question the correct way. And there are obviously correct ways to do that. You usually use a PICO framework, which I'll go through that in a bit more in a moment. And then once you've got your research question, it's actually quite important for you to register it, especially if you're going to aim to publish in high impact papers. If you don't register it, no one knows that you're doing it. And then if I register it and I'm doing it, I'll get priority over your manuscript publication because I've actually expressed an interest to do this systematic review. So when you register it, it's also, when you go on the platform to register, it allows us to see what actually has been published out there and what someone is doing. So I'll go through how to register it as well, and then I'll just go in terms of how to actually do the systematic review. You need to conduct a literature search, and for us to do that, it depends on what you're actually analyzing. You'll research standardized database like PubMed, Cochrane. You've also got the WHO clinical trial database as well. And then you need to define your inclusion and exclusion criteria, and then you will proceed in terms of how to extract your data and how to do your quality assessment as well. So, so how to define your research question? You do that using a PICO framework. So the PICO allows us to define the population. So, for example, in the context of here, we're mostly focusing on patients having IVF. And then it allows to define the intervention. So, for example, using a systematic review that I've recently done in terms of the trigger mechanism. So what form of trigger is the best? So that's your intervention. Comparator is whatever you want to compare it to. And the outcome of the clinical outcome of the interest. Primary outcomes, secondary outcomes. To be honest with you, systematic review, we don't have to label it as primary and secondary outcome. That's mostly for an RCT. So you can just list them as just outcomes of interest. So let's try and practically define a PICO here. So my research question is aiming to assess the efficacy and safety of 2 different forms of triggers in normal responders for patients undergoing IVF. So we're going to register this protocol now. So for that, we go on so the way to register it is through a portal known as Prospero. So Prospero is where all systematic review needs to be registered. It allows transparency of your protocol. It allows us to define how you're going to do your analysis as well. And also it allows you to put to pen what your idea is, and in terms of how your statistical will be done, what the inclusion criteria will be done. And also it's kind of, you're already starting to write your manuscript in a way. So this is what the Prospero website looks like. You can access that anywhere around the world. It's an NIHL website. So you register for your systematic review here, and essentially at the end of it, you'll complete something that looks like this. So the condition that we're looking at for women undergoing IVF, the intervention that we have in mind, and what the intervention one is, what the comparator will be. Here, I'm only looking at RCTs, which is what you should be aiming for when you do a systematic review. You can still do a systematic review for cohort studies, but it's not that powerful. And then we define what your outcome of interest should be and how we're going to go ahead and extract the data. So it allows you to essentially formulate a plan. So we've done quite a few steps already. So we've defined a research question, and then we've registered our Prospero. And now we go ahead and start actually doing it. So how do we do a literature search? To do a literature search, we know we're going to search a few databases. You've got Medline, you've got Embase, like I said, you've got the WHO, you've got Cochrane. You've got different platforms that you can use. I use Ovid. Your library may promote another platform. Ovid is pretty good. It's quite straightforward. And the way you define your search strategy, you're going to use something known as Boolean operators. That means is the language that the platform will use. Essentially, it's just a combination of something and something, or something or. And we're just going to go through that in a moment here. So let's say this is our research question. So in patients with IVF, does the use of HCG or GnRH lead to increased clinical pregnancy rate? This is the idea that we have. And the way I do it, I would actually go ahead and split it in 4 ways. So in patients with IVF, this is PICO, patient, population of interest is patients having IVF. Intervention is HCG, comparator is GnRH, and outcome is clinical pregnancy rate. So that's your PICO within your research question. And if you're able to split your question in these 4 ways, you've actually done a decent PICO analysis. And now we go on OVID. This is what OVID would look like. You register, you just sign in, and it will just be a blank page like this. And what you need to know now is actually how to speak to that platform. You've got different terms that you use. So the term that you need to know is something known as a mesh term. So the mesh term is the equivalent of how you tag your paper. And so this is an example of how a mesh term would be. It's quite a heavy slide, so I'm not going to go through all of it, but you can have a think, you can have a look. So for example, for just our populations, which is IVF patient, the mesh term will come across as IVF, or the abbreviation IVF, or assisted reproduction, or ICSI, or ovulation induction, or whatever you want to do. So you need to start thinking about what the mesh term for your patient population is. And then you look for your interventions, so GnRH, how the labeling it has within your mesh term. So once you type it in OVID, it would list you which mesh term kind of mirrors the idea that you have. And once you've got all of this, then you combine them using your Boolean strategy, which is for our patient of interest, we're actually going to use quite a broad spectrum, so we're not limiting it. The moment you start, you remember earlier I was saying the word and or if you use the word or, it actually broadens your search. And the moment you put and, it starts restricting it. So for the first thing you need to do is just put or for everything. So your first criteria, let's map out every single study out there that is published on IVF. And then we're going to look at the intervention. Every study out there that uses the word GnRH in any of these papers. Let's have a look at every single study out there that uses the word HCG in their manuscript. Anything that uses clinical pregnancy, and then we're focusing on RCT. So you're actually going to have 5 search strategies that are actually individual search strategy. And the next thing that you do is actually start combining them. So I'm going to be using IVF and GnRH and HCG and clinical pregnancy and RCT. And this is how your search strategy will go down from 25,000 papers to potentially just 700, because you start using the combination. Doing the right combination is the most important thing. So let's have a look here. So you're losing at intervention 1, we've identified 42,000 papers. Intervention step 2 is 32,000, then 35, then 2,000. And this is obviously, if you're just using or, you're going to end up screening 42,000 papers, which is, you can't do that. But the moment you start combining them, you end up with 54. And this is what you should be aiming for. And this is what your Prisma diagram would look like when you do your figure 1, which is that you screen 54,000 and then you end up with 54 as your final number that you'll be screening. All right, so we've done that now. So how do we go ahead and screen these manuscripts? There are different platforms that you can use. So you've got the Cochrane platform, which is Covidence. It's an excellent platform, but it comes at a cost though, so you need to pay for that. And the alternative is to use Rhine, which is free of charge. So I use Rhine. And if you use Rhine, you can still pay for it, so it allows different collaborators, but it's pretty good as a starting thing. So we export all our manuscript or abstract to this Rhine portal, and then you start screening them. And the way you screen them, you literally like swipe right and left as if you're on Tinder or something. You just, if you like a manuscript, you swipe right. If you don't like it, you swipe left. And eventually you end up with a pool of papers that are of interest to you. And then we go ahead and do data extraction. For data extraction, your collaborators, all of you need to be in agreement what you're extracting. So I usually have a meeting with my team, and then we figure out what the Excel spreadsheet would look like so that we all in agreement what we're extracting. Things that you need to extract is the year of the study, the country that the study has been performed as, and then the characteristics of the study, and obviously the intervention, the outcome. And so that's from a statistical analysis point of view. Then in addition to that, equally important is actually your bias assessment, which I'll go through in a bit more details here. There are different forms of bias assessment depending on which form of study you're doing. For example, if you're using an RCT, you would use grade, but if you're using non-RCT, you use Robbins 1, Robbins 2. There are different forms. You just have to figure out which one is best for you, and then you will grade them. In addition to bias, you need to grade them in terms of the level of certainty associated with that: high, moderate, low, very low. And then you go ahead and actually do your analyses as well. Different software available to use it. There's Cochrane Redman, which again is it is free, but it's only available as an online program now, so you can't download it. So you do need a Cochrane account to use it, but you can register for that. Or you got advanced form of statistical analysis software, Stata, which I also use. But to use Stata, you need to know how to use Stata because it's a language-based model, so you need to know which command to use. So I think if you've never done anything before, probably try and use Redman to start with. And once you pulled your data in there are different ways you do your meta-analysis. There's fixed effects, random effects, and most of the time you'd use random effect. Don't bother with fixed effect too much because you're looking at RCT, you're looking at numerous analyses, so there'll be different heterogeneity that comes into play. So use random effect. And then once you pull your data together, you'll be given something known as an I2 statistics. This allows us to gauge how much heterogeneity there is in your studies as well. It's important to quote that when you do your analysis as well. And then in addition to all this, you can do sensitivity analysis as well, which I'll go in terms of why that's important. And after you've done all this, you'll come up with your forest plot. The program will give you a forest plot, which is a visual representation of how your analysis is done. You can also do a funnel plot, although it's not really published funnel plots. It comes as your supplementary paper, but it allows us to visualize the bias assessment, and then you'll come with grade as well. So this is what figure 1 of your study, of your manuscript would look like. So this is your search strategy. So I've searched all these databases, and by combining all of them, I ended up with 1387 that needed to be screened. We've excluded that on Ryan or Cochrane. You've excluded 1300. You've ended up with 79 papers that you have to actually download and screen. And once you've actually visually read them, you will extract a couple of them. You'll end up with 25 also that actually is part of your RCT, of your meta-analyses. And this is what your bias assessment would look like. Anything in green is good. Anything in yellow is not sure. Red is bad. This is a grade analysis. So it looks at different forms of. So you've got 5 forum, essentially, is what we call it. So it looks at whether there was binding, whether the sequencing was random, whether it was concealed, and you do that through Redman as well. And this essentially is what your figures would look like, right? So you've got this forest plot here, and these are the studies that you've included. And you've got the total population of interest here, and then you can have a risk ratio assessment as well. And one thing I wanted to point out is, just for the sake of the discussion, is you've got these, this is just for you to understand sometimes how bad systematic reviews are. So you've got these 2 forest plots here. So this forest plot, they're comparing the same thing, GnRH versus HCG. They're both clinical pregnancies. And one other thing you need to look at is, I think a lot of the time the naive audience will look at it, so actually the mean, the risk ratio is 1.1 and 1.4, so it's comparable. So there's no much difference in these 2 systematic reviews and the confidence interval or whatever. But the one thing you need to look at, the whole point I put this is actually look at your numbers here. So this systematic reviews has a total population of 395. And this systematic review, for the sake of this discussion, has just under 200. Are they as good as each other? They're not. And the way you do this is what you should do in addition to your systematic reviews, known as a post hoc power analysis. And the way that's important is it allows us to gauge how relevant is a patient population of 395 in the grand scheme of things. And by doing a power calculation, we'll tell you that actually with a patient population of 395, the results that you publish here has a power of, say, 10% or 15%. That means 85% of your population does not qualify for that. So that's equally important than just doing systematic reviews, actually doing a power calculation in addition to that. And again, I'm not going to go through how to do it because it's a whole 20 minutes about how to do it, but that's quite important. When you start reading systematic reviews now, see, majority of them do not do a power calculation, which is actually a requirement now. So again, if you're looking at publishing in FNS or human reproduction, power calculation is becoming one of the main things that's required in addition to Prospera requirement. And I think you all should be aiming to try and aim for obviously top tier journals by doing such things. And the other thing I wanted to say just to close here is actually how to assess the integrity of a lot of the papers out there. You'll see that there's a high number of RCTs that have been published. And now looking back on it, at least from editorial point of view, you realize they're not being done correctly. And the way to do this is actually by using something as a track checklist, which I use. It's been introduced by Ben Moore, which all of you most probably be aware of. And it allows RCTs to be judged on several domains in terms of governance, the quality of the authors, whether any of the authors have papers that's been retracted. And we can actually check on every single author in how many papers have been retracted and the quality of the papers published and why they've been retracted. If anyone has a paper that's been retracted, it needs to be reported. And then we need to assess how the interventions are plausible and the time frame. That means in terms of protocol registration to RCT being published, was there a long time frame? And why is that time frame that much? If the outcome is live birth, you will have a 1-year delay, no problem. But if your outcome of interest is, let's say, biochemical pregnancy, and if you have a time frame of 3 years between protocol registration and RCT, it makes you wonder why that is the case. And then you also look at dropout rates as well, which is important in terms of how many patients were part of the protocol registration for a study trial. This was a power calculation that they've done, and how many they've actually recruited. If there's a massive difference in that, it doesn't fit the track checklist. And then if the outcome of interest are the same as what was reported in the clinical trial registration and what was published. So there's very quick overview of what to do. And obviously a lot for you to think about. If you've got any questions, I'm going to drop my email at the end of this presentation as well. And so happy for you to guys just email me if you want some specific advice about something. But that's it for me. Thank you.
चाय वाय तो मिल जाती है ना? Okay.
So thank you, Yusuf. I think that was an excellent lecture as usual.
No worries, pleasure.
I think you need more time.
They keep increasing it every time I come.
And thank you, Kalpana. Your lecture was also very, very comprehensive and good. So any questions?
Thank you, ma'am.
Any questions by the audience? No, I don't think so. So is Professor Geddes there? Professor Geddes, we'd like your comments. Yes. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You will hear I am in a place you are all familiar with. I am in a hospital lobby.
Oh,
You see?
yeah.
Thank you, presenters. Only one spelling mistake or grammatical error in all the slides that were shown. I will give a prize to whoever spotted the grammatical error. I am sure the speaker will be very grateful. The prize is 6 onion bhajis, cooked by Dr. Surveen. The presentations were very, very detailed. What is important is that our delegates who have stayed with us during the presentation should take the opportunity to carefully look at each of the slides with information. And if they don't understand a particular term or technology that is used, they should direct the question to the speaker. And Dr. Youssef has kindly and generously offered his assistance. And so he will answer, as I'm sure Dr. Singh will also answer, right? So good, very detailed. The other most important thing is my suggestion to the delegates. Please give feedback. Dr. Rupali may consider arranging a standard feedback form, which will make it more user-friendly for our delegates. For example, did the delegates achieve set out to do by attending this important session? Was it too detailed? Was it not detailed enough? Time for me to stop talking. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shweta. It was really excellent and we were hooked to the lecture. You know, sometimes my issue is that we get articles for review. I've recently got an article for review and it's an RCT. So Dr. Yusuf, can you let me know that when you get an article for review, how do you critically just judge? What is the first thing what you would, say, or the first 5 important things which will help you in making a decision that this is worth it or to be eliminated or to be, a kind of modified?
Yeah, and the way I review article has actually changed recently, and especially for RCT, the first thing I would look at is whether it's actually registered. You'll be surprised how many articles are actually not registered. And if it's not registered, that's your answer. It's difficult for you to judge any bias or any issue with how it's run because it's actually not been registered. You do have a 6 months delay when you start an RCT that you can retrospectively register it, but it needs to be registered. That's my primary thing. And the other thing you look at RCTs is how has the analysis been done? Is it done as an intention to treat analysis or per protocol analysis? That's quite important. But a lot of the time you'll see as, and that's defined in your trial registration. So if your trial registration is an intention to treat analysis, and then suddenly your manuscript is a per protocol analysis, you figure out why is the disparity there? The disparity is because you've had dropouts, and dropouts have not been reported. And then you look at the flowchart to see whether it matches. So this is not me being very, very like mean about it, right? Otherwise, there's obviously very good things about RCTs. I've done RCTs, hate them because I just get called throughout the entire year about randomizing, blah, 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 what's going on. I absolutely hate them. So I do have a lot of respect for people who run RCTs, but when you start criticizing them, I'm not looking at the good thing here. Yeah, I'm just looking at the bad things in a manuscript, and that's the primary thing. Like I recently we were doing a PGT umbrella review about RCTs, and you realize that a lot of this stuff out there in terms of the embryology part of things is not registered, and you just can't put that in an evidence point of view. Same with the trigger paper I was talking about. We had around 47 RCTs in total. And the moment you start doing your integrity assessment, which you can use the same model to gauge a paper, by the way. So have a look at the paper that I put in there, the Benmore track checklist. It will allow us to use as a framework for you to judge your manuscript when you come in for review. and you'll figure out what's right and what's wrong. But for me, the primary thing, like I said, is trial registration and per protocol or ITP analysis.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Where do you come across the power of a study? You said when you are looking at systematic reviews, a good review will have a power mentioned. Where is it usually mentioned?
Yeah, so the power calculation will, so it's only relevant when if you look at a systematic review and you find out that one, there's not enough RCTs, right? Or the RCTs that are out there are very small numbers. So let's say you have a systematic review and your overall patient population is like 1,200. That's great, yeah? I think we can all safe to say, I think 1,200 patients is good enough, yeah? But if you've got a systematic review and your power calculation and the number in combination is like 87, and you only have two RCTs out there, one is a 30 and one is 40 or something like that, then it will make you wonder, like, okay, you've done a systematic review and whatever, and you find your odds ratio, whatever you want, right? Relevant or not, significant difference or not, but is that relevant to what you're doing? And so I'll give you just a brief example. So we are again from a trigger point of view, right? So I'm doing a network at the moment on trigger in high responders. Yeah. So that means, does the use of GnRH or HCG, is it relevant from a clinical pregnancy in high responders only? We've already done normal responders. We're now looking at high responders. What you realize is there are only 5 RCTs, high integrity RCTs, 414 patients in total, looking at clinical pregnancy of all the triggers. Yeah. Now, comparing GnRH agonists to HCG, only 2 RCTs are there. Total number of patients, 177. Yeah. You do your systematic review because you can. There are 2 RCTs out there. Your risk ratio comes as 1.14. All right. Your confidence interval is 0.8 to 1.6. Means no difference. Yeah. Now, there's no difference, or there's insufficient evidence to document an evidence. And that's how you start phrasing your little paragraph that you go in. If I say there's no evidence, you write no evidence, Shweta reviews it, I say there's no evidence because there's insufficient evidence to document an evidence. So that's the correct way. And then I'm the second reviewer and I say, actually, you've not done a power analysis to look at the relevance of your RCT. So you do a post hoc power analysis. This is getting a bit technical, but I'm going to tell you anyway. And there's a different program that you use for that. And what it will give you is a Z value and a power value. The power value will come as 10%. So this is for my manuscript, right? The power value was 10.6%. What that means is the RCTs that are published, looking in terms of the sample size in each, the proportion in each, whatever, is only relevant to 10% of the population out there. So the systematic review is good, but it's identifying that there's a massive gap in terms of the need for a proper design RCT, and which comes to slide 1. Your systematic review is identifying research gaps, and that's why it's important to do your post-hoc power analysis. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so what's the maximum power analysis generally which you find in paper?
Usually the closer it is to like 80, that's what we put. 0.8 is what we use. And
so what would you say
get a lot of systematic review
for a
with
good
0.8.
power analysis, what would your value be?
Say that again, sorry.
For a good power analysis,
Yeah,
what would your
80%.
value be? 80 would be.
80%.
That's
Yeah. That's the number 80 has been picked as just like a p value of 0.05 has been picked to be relevant. You know, that's 80 has been picked.
Yeah.
But you can define it. For example, when you write your stuff, you may think actually for me it's 75%, although it's a bit random for you to pick 75. So when you do your analysis, you put 0.75 as the required, and it will tell you how relevant it is.
Okay. So I think we've had a very good discussion, and there's lots more to ask you, Yusuf, but I think we need to sign off, and I suggest that we give you a larger slot, both you
Oh
and
my God.
next
Oh,
time.
my pleasure. So anytime. Rupali has my WhatsApp. So
There's
tell
one
me
thing which
anytime.
I feel with a larger slot you can do is that go through an RCT or a systematic review or a network analysis, right, in a practical manner that, okay, this is what was done and this is what happened and these were the
So next time what I'll do, I'll use my own paper and I'll just go from start to finish and then critique my own thingy.
yeah,
And then you'll be able to appreciate the
like
And
you
I'll
have
difference.
to
make
do
sure that,
hand-holding.
yeah, I'll make sure all our fellows attended the whole series with whatever you're doing it. And our
Say that
young
again.
Turks
Sorry, you
also.
broke up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I
you
think,
broke up there, so I didn't hear what you were saying. Sorry, my
so
apologies.
I think the hand holding is very important. Like if you just do one full example from the beginning to the end,
Yeah,
that would be very, very, very nice.
yeah, no worries. Yeah, that's fine. Just let me know when I'll stop it in here. My pleasure.
Great. Thank you. Thank
No
you,
worries.
Yusuf. Thank you, Kalpana. Thank you, Professor Geddes, for being with us. And of course, Rupali, Shweta. Thank you, Rupali. I think very well
Thank you,
organized.
ma'am. Thank you,
Yeah.
All right.
everyone.
Thank you, guys. Pleasure. See you
Hard work.
soon.
Dr. Seema.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you, Seema. Thank you. Thanks, Haryana chapter.
Thank you and bye, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Haryana chapter. Thank you, Seema.